Allah tested Ibrahim with his own son, the story behind Hajj. The knife trembled in Ibrahim's hand. Beneath him lay his son. The son he waited years for. The son he loved beyond words. And around them, the desert stood completely silent. No wind, no voices, no sound except the heartbeat of a father about to do the unimaginable. Imagine looking into the eyes of your own child, while believing Allah has commanded you to sacrifice him. Not an animal, not a stranger, your son, Ismail. And yet, neither of them ran. Because this was never just a story about sacrifice. It was a story about absolute trust in Allah. But just before the blade came down, history changed forever. Because from this family came everything: the Kaaba, Zamzam, Ṣafā and Marwah, even al-Adha itself. Hajj did not begin with rituals. It began with a family who trusted Allah when nothing around them made sense. If you find value in this, support the channel so it can reach others. Before Makkah was surrounded by millions of footsteps, before the sound of adhan echoed through the city, before the Kaaba became the heart of the world, there was nothing there, only silence, a barren valley, trapped between mountains of stone. No trees swayed in the wind, no birds crossed the sky, no sign that life had ever touched that place. Just burning sand and heat that seemed to swallow everything alive. Then one day, Ibrahim arrived. Beside him walked Hajar, carrying their infant son, Ismail, a mother, a father, a baby, and an emptiness so vast it felt endless. Hajar standing there, scanning the horizon. Nothing. No water, no shelter, no people coming from afar. Just desert stretching in every direction. Then Ibrahim quietly placed down a small bag of food and a little water, small enough that anyone could see it would never last. Hajar watched him carefully, and then, without explanation, he turned around and began to walk away. At first, she thought he was leaving for something nearby, maybe searching, maybe returning soon. But he kept walking, step after step, further into the desert, the distance between them growing larger with every second, until fear finally broke through her voice.
Ya Ibrahim.
The mountains carried her words through the empty valley, but he did not answer. She called again.
How can you leave us here, in a place where there is no one? No life, no water.
Still, he kept walking, not because he did not love them, but because if he turned around, he might not be able to leave at all. Imagine the weight in his chest. A father walking away from his crying wife, leaving behind his baby son beneath the burning sun. Every step must have felt like tearing his own heart apart. Then Hajar asked the question that changed history forever, her voice trembling.
Did Allah command you to do this?
Ibrahim stopped. For a moment, the valley became completely still. Then he answered quietly, yes. And in that moment, everything changed. The fear in Hajar's heart disappeared, because now this was no longer abandonment. This was Allah's plan. And she said words that still shake hearts thousands of years later.
Then Allah will never abandon us.
No anger, no screaming, no blaming, only certainty. A woman standing alone in the middle of an empty desert, holding her child, with no visible way to survive. Yet her trust in Allah was stronger than the fear surrounding her. And that trust would turn a dead valley into Makkah. Days passed in the empty valley. The little water Ibrahim had left behind was gone. Then the food disappeared too, and the heat became merciless. The sun burned over the desert like fire, while the air itself felt too heavy to breathe. There was no shade, no rescue, no sign of another human being for miles. Only Hajar and her baby son. Then Ismail began to cry, not the soft cry of a child wanting attention. This was different. Weak, painful. The cry of thirst. The kind of sound that tears through a mother's soul. Hajar holding her baby in her arms, feeling there is nothing left she can do for him. Hajar watching her child suffer, while the entire world around her remains empty and silent. Every second must have felt unbearable. Then survival took over. Hajar stood up and ran toward the nearest hill, Ṣafā. Her eyes searched desperately across the horizon. Maybe a traveler, maybe a caravan, maybe anyone. Nothing. Only endless desert, shimmering beneath the heat. So she ran down again, her feet striking the burning sand as she rushed toward the other hill, Marwah, her heart pounding, her breath breaking, her fear growing with every step. Still nothing. No water, no people, no help. Again she ran, and again, 7 times between Ṣafā and Marwah. Not as a ritual, not as worship, but as a mother trying to save her dying child. Imagine the desperation in those runs, the scorching sand beneath her feet, the panic rising in her chest, the helplessness of returning each time with nothing. And she had no idea that, thousands of years later, millions of people would follow those same footsteps. What felt like desperation to her, Allah would turn into one of the greatest acts of worship in human history. Then suddenly, everything changed. Near little Isma'il, water burst from the earth, clear water exploding from the dry desert floor. In the middle of lifelessness, life appeared. Hajar froze in shock. Then she rushed toward it, falling to her knees, trying to gather the water before it disappeared, scooping it with trembling hands while crying, "Zamzam, Zamzam," meaning, "Stop, stop," because she feared the water would keep flowing away into the sand, and the valley that once held nothing would become the center of the world. Thousands of years later, that same water still flows beside Masjid al-Haram. People cross oceans just to drink from it. But it all began with a terrified mother, running through the desert to save her child. Years passed. Ismail grew into a young man, strong in body, steady in character, quietly composed, with a deep sense of responsibility. And Ibrahim loved him in a way only a father who waited a lifetime for a child could understand. This was not just a son. This was the answer to decades of longing, to nights filled with silent dua, to years of emptiness that were finally replaced with a living, breathing gift. Then one night, Ibrahim saw a dream. But it was not the kind of dream the mind can dismiss upon waking. It was clear, repeated, certain. In it, he was sacrificing his son, Ismail. He woke in the stillness of the night, but the stillness did not return to his heart. Something had changed. A weight settled inside him that would not leave. Because this was not confusion. For a prophet, a true dream is revelation. And Ibrahim understood. This was a command from Allah. Still, the meaning of it pressed down on him in a way no words could carry. How does a father stand with a command like this in his heart? Not a stranger, not a distant duty. His son, a young man who now walked beside him, who spoke with him, who had become his companion after years of separation. And yet, Ibrahim was not a man driven by emotion alone. He was Khalilullah, the one chosen by Allah for an intimacy of devotion and love unlike any other. And he knew something deeper than fear. When Allah commands something, there is wisdom beyond what the heart can immediately comprehend. But understanding does not erase love. He still loved his son. He still felt the full weight of what was coming. And now, the hardest test was not the dream itself, but the moment it would no longer remain a dream. Then came a moment that feels almost too heavy for words. A conversation between a father and his son, standing on the edge of a command neither of them had ever experienced before. The Qur'an captures it with clarity and depth. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. فلما بلغ معه السعي قال يا بني إني أرى في المنام أني أذبحك فانظر ماذا ترى. When he became old enough to work alongside him, Ibrahim said, "O my dear son, I see in a dream that I am to sacrifice you, so tell me what you think." But imagine the reality behind those words, a father standing in front of his son, not as a distant figure of authority, but as someone breaking the weight of a truth he cannot soften. The hesitation that must have lived in his voice, the silence that must have followed each breath, the way his eyes must have struggled to meet his son's. This was not an order being imposed. It was a father speaking with a heart already surrendering. And then came the response. Not hesitation, not fear, not confusion, but something far greater than instinct. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya abati if'al ma tu'mar. Satajiduni insha'Allahu minas sabirin. O my father, do what you have been commanded. You will find me, if Allah wills, among those who are patient. No panic, no resistance, no turning away. Just calm certainty. A young man standing before something unimaginable and yet choosing trust over fear. And in that moment, it was no longer only a father being tested. It was two hearts aligned in submission to Allah, one preparing to give, one prepared to be given. And this is why their story was never meant to be forgotten. Then came the moment. Not a concept, not a story anymore. A real step into action. Ibrahim walked with Isma'il toward the place of sacrifice. Two figures moving through a vast, silent desert where even the wind felt like it had slowed down. Every step carried a weight no human being can measure. Behind them was everything familiar. Ahead of them was something neither of them had ever experienced before. And in that space between the two, there was only obedience. Some narrations mention that Shaitan appeared more than once on that path, not with force, but with whispers. Questions meant to loosen certainty, thoughts meant to reopen hesitation, suggestions meant to make the heart turn back. But Ibrahim did not engage with doubt. He resisted it, and Ismail, too, remained firm beside him. This struggle is remembered in Hajj today, when pilgrims throw stones at the Jamarat, not as a symbol of violence, but as a reminder that the real battle is not always seen. It happens inside the human heart, between surrender and hesitation, between obedience and excuse, between Allah's command and everything the self clings to. Because Hajj was never only a journey of movement through sacred places, it is a reenactment of resistance against fear, against temptation, against the pull of dunya when it tries to weaken certainty. And in that desert moment, Ibrahim and Ismail were not just walking toward a place. They were walking through every form of resistance a human heart can ever face, and choosing Allah over all of it. Then Ibrahim laid his son down, not as a ritual, not as a routine, but as the final step of something no human heart could ever easily carry. Imagine his hands in that moment, not steady, not strong, but human. A father's hands, trembling under the weight of love and obedience colliding in the same chest, and Ismail, lying there, not in panic, not in resistance. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. When they had both submitted, and he laid him down upon his forehead. It is a verse that does not describe movement as much as it describes surrender. Two wills becoming aligned with something greater than both a father lowering what he loves most, a son accepting what he cannot change. And then, at the very point where human action reaches its limit, everything stops. The command is lifted. The story is interrupted by mercy. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya Ibrahim qad saddaqta ar-ru'ya. O Ibrahim, you have fulfilled the vision. Not because blood was required, but because sincerity had already been proven. And in that moment, the impossible is replaced with a gift, a ram sent as redemption from Allah. Isma'il rises unharmed. The test is over, not with loss, but with acceptance fulfilled. Because Allah was never asking for the life of a son. He was revealing the depth of a heart. And from that day, Eid al-Adha was born. Every year since, millions of people sacrifice not to repeat that moment, but to remember it. A father who chose Allah over everything, and a mercy that turned surrender into celebration. But Allah did not only honor them in trials, He honored them in legacy. Years later, the same father and son stood together again. Not in a moment of testing this time, but in a moment of building stone by stone. Hand by hand, Ibrahim and Ismail, raising the foundations of the Kaaba in the middle of the barren valley. No palace, no workers, no grand tools, only two men, a desert, and a house being raised for Allah. Imagine the heat of the sun on their backs as they lifted each stone into place, and with every movement their tongues remained alive with dua, not of pride, but of humility. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbana taqabbal minna, innaka antas sami'ul alim. Our Lord, accept this from us. Indeed, you are the all-hearing, the all-knowing. They were not asking for recognition, only acceptance. Then came a command that seemed almost impossible in that moment. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa'adhin fin nasi bil Hajj. And proclaim to the people the pilgrimage. Imagine Ibrahim standing there in an empty valley. No cities, no crowds, no signs of future travelers. Only silence stretching in every direction. Yet he obeyed. And Allah responded with a promise that defied what the eye could see. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya'tuka rijalan wa ala kulli damirin. Ya'tina min kulli fajjin amiq. They will come to you on foot and on every lean camel. They will come from every distant path. And centuries passed. Deserts turned into roads. Distances shrank in meaning. Generations came and went. Yet the promise never faded. Today, millions still arrive. From every language, every land, every background. Answering a call that began in an empty valley with one man's voice. Labbaik Allahumma. Labbaik. Here I am, O Allah. Here I am. And it is still Ibrahim's call that echoes in every step they take. Every part of Hajj carries a memory, not abstract symbols, but living traces of one family's journey, Ṣafā and Marwah. They are not just two hills, they are the echo of a mother running through silence, searching with nothing in her hands except hope. Zamzam. It is not just water, it is mercy, breaking through rock and sand at the moment. Everything looked finished. The sacrifice of Eid al-Adha. It is not just an animal offered, it is the reflection of a father's obedience when love and command stood in the same place. And the Kaaba. It is not just a structure in the middle of Makkah. It is stone placed upon stone by a father and his son raising a house while the world around them was still empty desert. Hajj, in its deepest form, is not a set of movements. It is memory turned into worship, a story written into the land itself of Ibrahim, Hajar, and Ismail, when trust in Allah stood stronger than fear, loss, or uncertainty. And maybe that is why it still reaches the heart so directly today, because it does not feel distant, it feels human. And somewhere beneath all the rituals, there is a question that quietly follows every person who hears their story. If I were tested in the way they were tested, what would my heart choose? After hearing this story, which part of Hajj will never feel the same again?